Okay, part 2 of chapter 11. We're going to start with looking at the first part of the second line of defenses. Alright, so still within the innate immune response. Now, the second line of defense is going to kick in when the first line of defenses are breached. So, despite the best effort of the first line of defense, the barriers, the chemicals, the microbes occasionally get in, and so it's here where they're going to find the second line of defense. And there's a variety of players in this process, but a major one, or major group, are going to be the leukocytes. Those are the white blood cells, distinguishing them as being different from the red blood cells. So first off, within our body, we have the lymph and lymphatic vessels. Alright, this is slightly different than what you might consider regular blood vessels. Alright, and but they work in conjunction with each other. So a lot of times when you learn about the cardiovascular system and the blood vasculature, you also learn about the lymphatic vessels. And the lymphatic system is very important for our immune response. Alright, the lymphatic system is a collection of tissues and organs, which we'll look at that on the next slide, and then a collection of vessels. Alright, so here you see the lymph node, you see the lymphatic vessels here, and then in this area you see the actual blood vessels. You have the arteries here, you have the blood capillaries, and you have the veins that brings the blood back to the heart and to the lungs. And here you have the lymphatic vessels that are very close to the capillary beds here. And what happens is that as blood moves through the capillaries, part of the blood, the plasma, right, not the red blood cells, can move out in small amounts into the interstitium, right, into the cells, and that's called interstitial fluid. And this allows for basically cleaning up of this area, and then the interstitial fluid moves into the lymphatic vessels here, and will then drain back into the lymph node. And if there's any garbage in here, any bacteria, any viruses, any foreign material, it can move into the lymphatic vessels, drain into the lymph node, and it's here where your immune response is actually going to mount a response against whatever pathogen was in the interstitial area here. Alright, and then eventually from the lymph node, that extra fluid, that lymph, it is fluid, will move back into the venous system and mix with the blood, and you can start this process back over again. Alright, so I think I've basically just said all of this looking at that figure. Alright, some of the blood, or the blood delivered to our tissues, there's the plasma that can exit, that is the clear fluid, and it seeps into small spaces, and then it's interstitial fluid, and once it gets into the lymphatic capillaries, it is called lymph. The lymph goes to the lymph nodes. It's drained for pathogens, filtered, very similar to how our kidneys filter blood to produce urine. Alright, the lymph is going to be filtered, moved back into the blood, and into the circulatory system. Right, so here, this slide shows the differences between primary lymphoid tissue and secondary lymphoid tissue. The primary lymphoid tissue, we'll talk a little bit more about that in chapter 12 when we talk about B cells and T cells, but primary lymphoid tissue is where the blood cells develop, and that's going to be bone marrow in yellow here, and then the thymus. Alright, the thymus is the largest, probably about the age of 2. And then shortly after that, it goes through a process called involution, where it starts basically to shrink. And so the yellow, the bone marrow, and the thymus are the primary lymphoid tissues. The secondary lymphoid tissues are where the lymph is going to be filtered, and that's where all of the activity of the immune response is going to occur. All right, secondary lymphoid tissue is the spleen. This is very important. There's going to actually be a lot of blood filtering through the spleen instead of just lymph. You have your lymph nodes, which you see a variety of lymph nodes throughout the body, and it's estimated that there's 500 to 600 lymph nodes in the human body. A lot of them are going to be found in chains of lymph nodes, as you see here. There are some individual lymph nodes that you can see here in the armpits. And then you also have lymph nodes in the intestinal system, the digestive system, and those are called GALT, gut-associated lymphoid tissue. You've got MALT, mucosa-associated lymphoid tissue, and there the MALT is going to be the adenoids and the tonsils. Those are can be quite important in helping to screen for foreign material. Yes, tonsils and adenoids do sometimes get taken out, and that is because they are potentially harboring bacteria, but they can also be very large, which can cause physiological issues, issues with sleeping, issues with breathing, and so sometimes it's actually just better to take them out. All right, the primary lymphoid tissue again is the thymus and the bone marrow. The thymus is the butterfly-shaped organ right behind the sternum, right above the heart. If a person, a child, undergoes heart surgery, then in almost every case the thymus is going to have to be removed. The thymus is the place of T-cell maturation, which T-cells are part of the third line of defense, which is chapter 12, and then the bone marrow. This is going to be the site for red blood cell development, as well as some white blood cell production. Well, actually, all of white blood production, and then some of the further development for other types of leukocytes. All right, so lymph nodes. Humans have 500 to 700. They're going to be clustered. They serve as filtering and screening centers for the lymph to pull out any garbage before the lymph goes on to be pulled back into the blood. And this is important because the lymph is going to carry garbage, and you really don't want garbage in terms of bacteria or pathogens being in the blood. So that's a good process. And upon detecting an invading microbe, leukocytes in a lymph node are going to rapidly multiply and expand. That's why the lymph nodes become swollen, because you actually have a lot of cellular proliferation that's going on. And if you have swollen lymph nodes, that's going to be an indicator of some sort of infection. Whether it's viral, whether it's bacterial, something is going on in order to cause those lymph nodes to expand. Then the spleen, located in the upper left part of the abdomen. It's a place where leukocytes are going to look for invaders by filtering blood, and also a good place to clean that blood and to identify any potential microorganisms. Now, typically you don't have a lot of microbes in the blood, but you can have small amounts, such as if you are eating potato chips or corn chips, and you bite wrong, you chew wrong, and you jab a corner of the thick tortilla chip into your gum. All right, that can actually send some microbes into your blood. It's going to be low numbers, but your mouth is a dirty place. It's not like the wound is going to be very deep, but it could be quite substantial on the microscopic level. All right, this is an important figure to look at. Alright, this table shows a variety of different leukocytes. Alright, the leukocytes are the white blood cells, and you have two major groups. You've got the granulocytes and the agranulocytes. The agranulocytes are without granules. And the granules in the granulocytes here are all of these little tiny circles. You've got some circles there, you've got a lot of granules here with the basophils. The eosinophils, it's kind of hard to tell, but all of this dark purple stuff in this area, those are individual granules. The neutrophils, all of these little tiny specks, are also granules. The large purple area is going to be the nucleus. Alright, but really the focus is going to be the granules. And this is what you need to know. Alright, this note material. Neutrophils are highly phagocytic. Those are the doers of the immune response, able to fight many different invaders, especially bacteria and viruses, or virus-infected cells. Eosinophils are somewhat phagocytic, but a major problem in allergies as well as parasites, parasitic infections, whether that be a protozoan organism or a worm infection that we talked about in part 1. Alright, if you have a high level of eosinophils in your blood, eosinophilia, the physician, medical personnel is going to wonder if you have a parasitic infection. Basophils, also same issue here with attack of allergens and parasites. Mast cells, right, can attack bacteria, but also a major player with allergies. And the mast cells are going to reside in tissues. And so that's important to note, because then if you have an allergen that comes into your tissue, then it can release the histamine and cause that allergic response. Alright, the agranulocytes, alright, what I didn't mention, okay, the granules have toxic material in them. And once these cells get activated, the material of the granules can then be released, and that can cause death of whatever the granules are being directed towards. Alright, with the monocytes are going to be found in the blood, and they are highly phagocytic. That is their main job. Monocytes are found in the blood. The monocytes move out to the tissue, where they're going to mature into macrophages. Alright, and macrophages are also highly phagocytic. So they are basically the same cell. They look a little different on the cell surface, so you can actually distinguish a monocyte from a macrophage. But monocytes, by definition, are found in the blood. Macrophages, by definition, are found in tissue. Alright, then there's dendritic cells. These guys are pretty cool. They have a ruffled membrane, long cytoplasmic extensions. Alright, they kind of look a little furry here. Alright, they have dendrites. They have finger-like projections that can move away from the cell, and those are going to be useful in being able to grab onto a pathogen and pull it down to the surface, where then it can be phagocytized. Dendritic cells are important because they're going to serve as a link or a bridge between the innate immune response, remember we're talking second line defense here, still innate, and a bridge between the third line of defense, which are the lymphocytes. And I mentioned real quick, it's going to be B cells and T cells primarily involved in that third line of defense. Alright, now last point for part 2 here. White blood counts can be used as a clinical measure to look at a particular type of infection. And you can look for the type of cells: neutrophils, eosinophils, basophils, monocytes, lymphocytes. Alright, those are the lymphocyte that is increased. If it's philia, that means that there's love, or a lot of them. So there's a lot of eosinophils in your blood. What might that indicate? Jump over here. That would indicate allergies, asthma, parasitic infections, monocytes, chronic infection, inflammation, and you can read the rest.